Good to be
You
back.
excited?
Yeah, definitely.
You can't fall back on beginner's luck. That's no excuse.
No.
So-
And with Leo next to me, I feel like I'm stealing my money.
Yeah.
No lefty challenge.
I'll do it. I'll do all the lefty challenge tonight. OK, we're going to start by looking at the front pages for Sunday. The Mail on Sunday is leading with George can skip stint in forces. That's obviously Prince George. They apparently won't have to serve in the military. The Sunday Telegraph has new homes must have green road schemes. We're going to come to that in just one moment. The Sunday Express is leading with £12 trillion Brexit trade boost. The Sunday Mirror has call the midwife love split. And Daily Star on Sunday, James Bond to hunt down psycho scumbag robots. We're definitely going to be talking about that. Those were your front pages. OK, so we're going to kick off with the Sunday Telegraph. Leo, you've got this one.
So they lead with new homes must have green road schemes. So new housing is being blocked unless councillors agree to introduce green schemes such as ULEZ, which isn't a homophobic slur. It's a low-emission zone, and low-traffic neighbourhoods, which is basically communism, in an approach that the Environment Watchdog is preparing to roll out across the country. And these low-emission zones are kind of pointless because cars are all going electric, so there aren't going to be any emissions. And, you know, by 2030, apparently, we're going to have phased out diesel and petrol cars.
But in the short term, you could say it does something, and particularly for the pollution of the people living in the area.
Yeah, but creating these, changing our environmental construction of cities for something that's just going to last a few years seems ridiculous. And one insider familiar with the discussions accused Natural England of green activism. They said it feels very much like they're trying to put a stop to people driving in certain areas of the country. And it's interesting, under the Stasi, because, you know, the low-emission neighbourhoods do get compared to communism quite a lot, because under the Stasi in East Germany, people who wanted to buy a car and be independent, to travel independently, were actually put on a list. I mean, obviously, they're put on a list to get the car. It took 7 years.
Of course.
They're put on another list that said they were a problematic person because they wanted to have control over their own destiny and over where they drove instead of just following the state-controlled buses.
Is this a form of Godwin's law? You're sort of leaping to the Stasi when it comes to environmentalists?
It's not Hitler. It's the Stasi.
It's not Hitler, so it's OK. That's OK. Nicholas, what do you make of all this? Do you think?
I mean, it's almost as if we didn't have a huge housing shortage in this country already. You know, we have people who rent struggling because we are not building enough homes to start with, and then we have a gazillion people landing on our shores every week who need to be housed, obviously, and now we have ever more increasing obstacles on the way of people who actually want to build
So then
homes.
why are people doing it? Why are they putting so much energy into something that, as Leo says, will just be a short-term solution?
It's a green ideology, and of course controlled, because, well, you might talk about emissions, but once you have 15-minute neighborhoods or towns, it can be about all sorts of things. What are you spending your money on? We know that the Bank of England is coming up with this Brit coin, digital currency. So this is just one puzzle piece in a bigger scenario of control over our lifestyle.
Is that not a little bit conspiratorial, Leo?
No, not at all. I mean, we can see it happening right in front of us. It's not a conspiracy theory if it's actually happening.
Well, no, but the 15-minute cities and the idea that they're going to move to digital currency entirely. I know there are steps towards that and people are talking about it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come to fruition, does it?
But it's already there in Oxford, Cambridge. They're talking about 2024, so it's just
in
down the corner.
In China, we can see, you know, what they're doing with
they have a social credit system.
Yes, social credit system. So if you have the wrong opinions, and also digital currencies can be controlled. So you have to spend it on a certain type of thing or in a certain area, or not being able to spend it at all. I mean, look at Nigel Farage getting his bank account cut off just because of.
Yes, I would agree. That's appalling.
Yeah.
But let's not catastrophise. We're going to move on to the Mail on Sunday. What are they leading with? Nicholas, you've got this one.
Yes, George can skip stint in forces. Looks like
good, because he's a bit young.
Well, for now, yeah.
Yeah.
For now, but the royal family might be breaking away with the centuries-old tradition.
Yes.
The monarch started at some point, or at least had a brief stint in the armed forces, in the Royal Air Force, to be precise.
Well, it's because the monarch is the commander-in-chief, and it kind of, as they say, gives it legitimacy, doesn't it? You know, if they fought,
they've risked their lives with the other men on the front line. And imagine, you know, Shakespeare's Henry V giving that speech, but just being actually 200 miles back from the front line. I'm doing some watercolours instead. I hope you have a nice fight.
In the olden times, they would risk their lives, literally.
Yeah.
At least some brief stint in the armed forces would have given them some.
But surely in this day and age, it is going to be up to him. You know, he's a human being with his own ideas about the world. He shouldn't have to go into the military,
Yes,
should he?
yes, he should. Prince Harry did. Prince
Harry boasted about the number of
It didn't
people
work
he
out
killed.
well for him, though, right? If that's what the armed forces do to you,
And doesn't it take
Imagine what it'd be like if he hadn't gone into that.
good point.
But doesn't it also, Leo, take a specific type of person to go into the armed forces? You know, I really admire people who do that. It's not something I could do. I'd be hopeless. You know, I have my skill. I can't use a gun. I can play badminton well. If the enemy wanted to play badminton, I'd do that.
But there's a lot of different roles in the armed forces now. I mean, you can see in Ukraine a lot of the roles. I mean, drone. You could be a drone pilot or something like that.
That was a bit cowardly for
I'm not that coordinated.
I'd argue.
No, I'm not so sure about this. I don't like this at all. We're going to move on now to the front cover of Sunday's Express. Leo, so Brexit's not all that bad, right?
Yeah, so Britain is getting a £12 trillion Brexit trade boost. I mean, that's a pretty much best case scenario. We're not getting the £12 trillion, but we're joining the Trans-Pacific Trade Bloc, not to be confused with the cisgender Pacific Trade Bloc. This is this Indo-Pacific area, and it's got trade worth £12 trillion a year. It's one of the biggest trade blocs in the world.
So this is quite... I mean, people are always talking down Brexit and saying that this has clearly led to economic catastrophe, and I don't think it necessarily has, or we know at this point.
No.
We have had all sorts of trade deals with Australia, with New Zealand.
Yep.
We've had 20 big trade deals with American states for our services industry. We've had that deal with Brazil recently. You know, so there's all this stuff is happening. Is it necessarily the case that this is such an economic disaster?
Well, I mean, the economic disaster was never there, considering that we had COVID and we had the so-called remoaners sabotaging Brexit for 3 years, and famously we had a anti-Brexit prime minister trying to get us out of the EU. in the person of Theresa May.
And on that, you know, the vaccine rollout was helped by the fact that we didn't have to go through EU bureaucracy. We didn't have to pay that £80 billion for the bailout fund. I think there are lots of advantages. We just don't hear about them very much.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Brexit was always going to be short-term turmoil and economic disruption. But long-term, I mean, who knows? I think it could, you know, now we've decoupled ourselves from what is a really officious bureaucratic system in the EU, you know, we're more agile. We could be, you know, the Singapore of Europe.
The trouble here is I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. We need a Josh Howie in here just to say how terrible Brexit is.
I voted Remain.
Did you? OK, there we go.
Actually, no, I'm not sure I'd vote Remain again.
Really?
So, yeah.
Well, because you've seen what the EU are like.
And I've seen what Remainers are like, and I don't want them to be happy.
You don't want to be in that gang.
Yeah.
No, but this is the point, isn't it? I mean, people did not really vote about the financial elements. They knew we were going to get a bit of a hit.
Yeah.
It is that idea of bureaucracy. It's that idea of democracy. It's that idea of being able to vote out the people who are in control. You can't vote out Ursula von der Leyen and all her cronies in the Commission. You can't do it. Anyway, that's my pro-Brexit rant for the evening. There's normally one. We're going to move on to the front cover of the Daily Star. Nicholas, what are they running with?
MI6 top secret. James Bond to hunt down psycho scumbag robots.
Wow. They always go with a really dramatic front cover, don't they? I mean, I will give them that. So is this the idea that if AI runs amok, as we've all sort of decided that it will, they're going to have to hire a particular person, a spy or something, to hunt them down and kill them?
Yeah, I mean, in the little... We don't really have the full story, but in the little text box, they talk about AI chatbots, which is slightly less exciting than this Terminator figure they've illustrated.
It depends what the AI chat box develop into, right?
Well, we did see recently an AI chatbot convince somebody to go and attack the Queen, like commit a sort of terrorist attack
Is that right?
on the Queen. Yeah, which was... I mean, obviously they had mental health issues.
What the bot did? The AI thing? No.
The person. So they were saying... they were basically putting all their sort of like weird assassination fantasies into this chatbot. And the chatbot was saying, yeah, no, that sounds great. No, you're a good guy. You should do that.
Yeah, when these things go sentient, we are all dead.
Are we talking about people or...
We're talking about the kind of people that use AI. Go on, Nicholas.
It's good that they want to keep with the spirit of times, which is AI is all the rage nowadays. But quite surprisingly, if you look at all these recent Bond movies or Mission Impossible movies, they're never dealing with Islamic terrorism, which is the elephant in the room. Whereas if you go to their website, like MI5, MI6, they always want people who can speak Arabic or Persian. And, you know, after all, ISIS was ruling over a large swath of land in Syria and Iraq. Quite a phenomenon.
Yeah, but Nicholas, we all know that ISIS are bad, right? We don't know that the AI is yet. And I quite like this idea that we're catastrophizing and making out they're going to kill us all.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
A lot of students don't know that ISIS was bad.
Do they not?
No. I remember flyering for Hate and Live. at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Yeah.
And we had ISIS as one of the options to hate on the poster. And he must have been like 18 years old. He came up with his friends. He's like, "That's racist." It's like, that's literally ISIS.
It's racist to criticise ISIS.
Yeah.
Well, you learn something new every day.
All
They're
the
just
more
misunderstood,
reason.
aren't they? Yeah. Just a decent bunch of chaps.
All the more reason to have a Bond movie with ISIS.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And I want to see Prince George going over there trying to.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
You.
Yeah. Well, OK. Well, that's all for part one. After the break, we're going to have Keir Starmer's secret meeting with Just Stop Oil, Europe leaning further to the right, and that's not just Nicholas. And is this the end of vape culture? See you in a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel,
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Sunday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle. I'm joined tonight by Leo Kearse and Nicholas DeSanto. We're going to kick off this section with the Mail on Sunday, and Labour have been fraternising with possibly the most annoying people in the world. I don't mean Owen Jones. Who is it, Leo?
Well, it's not far away from Owen Jones. It's Just Stop Oil. So
right.
Keir Starmer, Labour's leader, he's always banging on about how Just Stop Oil are arrogant and wrong and how he's going to take a tough line with them. Meanwhile, his aides are arranging secret meetings with Just Stop Oil's eco-zealots. And Labour has accepted £1.5 million over several years from Just Stop Oil's funder, Dale Vince. But they deny that he has any influence on policy,
well, yeah,
despite Labour now putting in all these policies like cancelling North Sea oil and gas contracts that directly benefit Dale Vince.
But wait a minute, Leo. Is it not the case that someone like Dale Vince is more likely to donate to a political party whose views already mirror his own, rather than the Labour are modifying their policies in accordance with his decree.
Why does he need to give them money then? I mean, I don't know, if Big Oil or Big Pharma were donating to a political party and the political party were then making decisions in their favour, if a mafia boss was donating to a judge who then found the mafia boss not guilty, would you not be like, wait a minute, is that
well, no,
I
don't think it's quite the same. I mean, I'm not saying it's not relevant or that we shouldn't take an interest in where the money's coming from, but I do think these kinds of people do donate to political parties. He's obviously going to donate to a party that supports the climate agenda, obviously.
Why doesn't he donate to the Green Party?
Well, because they're never going to get in.
But Labour, in response to the story, they say, no, it has no influence on our policies, which is outrageous. And the other fascinating thing is that these activists or eco-zealots present themselves in the guise of rebels or rebellion, Extinction Rebellion, whereas the whole establishment is with them. On the other hand, you have Tories in rule who are religiously pursuing this net zero dogma, and then you have the opposition in waiting, or the next government in waiting, who is making secret overtures towards them.
Yeah, but this meeting, I mean, we don't know what was said in the meeting. Now, Keir Starmer himself has described Just Stop Oil's tactics as wrong. He says they're arrogant.
Yeah, while he accepts the bundles of cash from Just Stop Oil.
Well, you know, that's fine. You can still criticise their tactics, but maybe the meeting is about him trying to calm them down a little bit. No, because you just laugh at it. You don't think there's anything in that?
I've got to be honest. I mean, that money, it sounds like a lot of money that's been given to the Labour Party. £1.5 million. It's the best investment like they could ever make, because previously Dale Vince's company's got £36 million in subsidies from the Labour Party, from the Labour government when they were in power.
Your point might be valid, but in response to your point, the article also talks about a leak to Labour list website in which there's a law proposal to make it more difficult for the police to arrest these disruptions, to arrest these activists as they create these disruptions.
OK, well, that's not good, because when they break the law, they ought to be arrested. However, if they're just peacefully protesting, they should be able to do that as well, right? I mean, that's clearly the case.
Yeah, but if they are blocking highways, notoriously, the ambulances...
Yes, that's the question.
Somebody's going to die. We saw a video this week of a trucker. It was in Germany, but the trucker nearly ran them over. He drove at them and luckily pushed them along the road, rather than them getting stuck and going under.
Yeah, I think something bad could definitely happen. But look, we're going to continue with this theme now on the Daily Mail. So what have Just Stop Oil ruined now, Nicholas?
This comedy show with Adam Hill, the Australian British-based comedian, the Last Leg. On the same day. And by the way,
you say as though you've never seen it. The way you're describing it.
I used to watch it before I stopped watching comedy on mainstream TV.
Yeah, well, that's a very good idea.
And started coming to Comedy Unleashed every month.
Good plug. I didn't ask you to do that.
Yeah, it was my personal initiative. But the thing is, the person at the centre of this invasion, William John Ward, was the same person who also invaded Wimbledon last week, and he was out on bail. So in what universe, if you're out on bail, you can still do that? I mean...
OK, explain this to me, though. Why are Just Stop Oil protesters interrupting a show that is ostensibly on their side of the debate, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they did say that, they're trying to... Because they were almost sort of welcomed on by Adam Hill.
It says Adam Hills was cheering when they came up.
Yeah, so it's very sort of... It's a big love-in. And obviously they're not interrupting anything important. I think this is a good thing to interrupt. It's better than stopping ambulances.
Yeah, it is. That's true.
And I couldn't believe, even Just Stop Oil interrupting it didn't make it worth watching. It was still incredibly dull television.
They go after soft targets, just like Western feminists who care all about the myth of gender pay gap, or why female Norwegian footballers are not paid as much as Lionel Messi, and they give a pass to the Middle Eastern oppressors of women, because it's not intersectionally convenient. Here we have people, if you have a problem with CO2 emissions, go after China, go after India.
Yeah.
You just disrupt Wimbledon, BBC proms, exactly, and then Adam Hill and his comedy show.
OK, right, we're going to move on to this one now in the Telegraph and the rise of the right. I've got quite a conservative panel tonight, so how do you two feel about this story?
So their tax cuts and patriotism as Spain typifies a continent turning right. It looks like this is a rally in Madrid. It looks like there's going to be electoral success for the centre-right Spanish People's Party. And they're going to go into some sort of alliance with the Vox Party. And we're seeing this across Europe. And to me, it looks like a natural reaction to how Europe has been mismanaged by the sort of woke blob that controls everything now and totally ignores what people's wishes are. If you look at France, people don't want mass immigration. They don't want all the social discord and everything that comes with it. They don't want net zero.
But I thought right-wing populism in Europe was over. I mean, that's what The Guardian's been saying.
Well, it's coming back because people aren't listening. The politicians aren't listening to the people.
Is there a danger? I mean, obviously, you're part Italian, Nicholas, or part Italian, part Iranian, is that right?
That's right.
Right, so you can discuss Italy, for instance. Italy's a good example, isn't it, where people have said that the far right is on the rise there. Giorgia Meloni and people like that who are branded as far right. Now, do you think people like that are simply right-wing populists, or do you think they do teeter into that far right bracket?
The thing is, the goalposts have moved so much to the left that even the most reasonable, my friend Leo here might be considered far right in some quarters. And here, the concern is that, for example, in Spain, the Popular Party, which is centre right, to get the necessary majority, they might have to create a coalition with Vox, who are the far right. And these far right people are so bad that, for example, in the region of Castile-Leon, they have suggested that women who want to abort their children have to first listen to the baby's heartbeat. Can you imagine how terrible these people are?
It's probably the worst thing I've ever heard. The most horrific.
I mean, Hitler personified, right?
You don't think there's any risk at all of certain far-right elements creeping in, particularly when it comes to these coalitions?
Listen, if people are worried about the far-right getting control in European countries, stop enacting policies that people don't want. All the net zero nonsense, the uncontrolled immigration, the gender woo-woo nonsense, the incredibly high taxes. People don't want that. Listen to people and do it. Otherwise, it's not a democracy.
It does. I mean, that stuff really does tap into people's negative feelings, and they start supporting parties they otherwise wouldn't normally support.
It's not just about negative feelings. I mean, people talk about populism as if it's a terrible thing. It's like, this politician is doing what the people want. That's what we're in a democracy. Politicians are supposed to do what the people want.
But the funny thing is how the article has been conceived. That the article argues that while Britain is veering to the left, as if it has been ruled by the right, Europe is veering towards the right, and says, what are these populist party or far-right parties in Europe are doing? Cutting taxes, national identity, boosting the family, and questioning the wisdom of net zero. Sounds familiar? No, because we have been governed by the Tories, who are anything but conservative.
OK, we're going to move on now.
Rejoin Europe.
We're going to the Observer now. What's this about the police sharing sensitive data? Nicholas, what's this?
Basically, this is quite a staggering story. People who were, in this case, visiting the police website, reporting on certain intimate issues such as rape or sexual harassment or sexual...
reporting crimes, in other words.
Exactly, but specifically this kind of crime. Their data was harvested by the police website through this tracking tool called Metapixel, and then packaged and bundled and given to Facebook so that they could be later targeted with specific ads by Facebook.
Now, just to say, though, so the Met Police are saying that this was not deliberate, that this was completely accidental. This Metapixel was placed on the website in June 2023 relating to a recruitment marketing campaign, and then they have removed it since they've been alerted to it. So is it just an accident, Leo?
I fully believe that it is an accident.
Because it would be weird for them to try and make money out of people's tragedy.
I've worked with the police, and they're not all, even the people who are the tech-savvy people in the police aren't the most tech-savvy. Everybody types with two fingers like that.
Exactly.
So I can fully believe that it was left there from a previous social media campaign. It was accidental. It just shows how nefarious this stuff is. Because, just that slight oversight, and then, all this information is kept. And then it's often, repeated back to the person. So if you've submitted data to the Met website, you're going to get ads related to what you've submitted. So, are you looking for a new, car alarm, or worse if it's,
Well, I mean, I just now take it for granted that all of my data is everywhere, because you can't really control it anymore. Because all of these social media sites have all your information. They're selling them, they're harvesting it, selling it on. That's how they're making their money. Do we just have to make our peace with that now?
I mean, another concerning aspect is how voracious Facebook or Meta's appetite for data is. They've just launched Threads, and I wonder why some people are flocking towards Threads, because just the amount and the types of data that they harvest from there is staggering. And in this case, you would wonder, okay, the police might have done it maybe unintentionally, but Facebook was trying to receive these items and allegedly present these users or people who had referred to the police with personalized ads.
OK, well, we're going to move on now to the Express. Leo, you've got this one, vaping. What's this about?
So disposable vapes could be completely banned as they litter streets, and there are also concerns for health. So the local government association has said that single-use vapes blight our streets as litter, are a hazard in our bin lorries, are expensive and difficult to deal with in recycling centres. A hazard in bin lorries? Like, it's a disposable vape taken down a bin lorry. Like you're told not to take on, more than 100 mils of fluid onto a plane, like a shampoo bottle's taken down a Boeing 747.
Yeah, I think they might be overreacting here a little bit. However, is there an issue with vapes? They're very popular apparently among children because they're brightly coloured.
Yeah.
And
they taste like watermelon.
And they taste all those kind of
If they tasted
flavours.
like cigarettes, they wouldn't be.
Well, maybe that's what they need to do. They just outlaw all the stupid flavours.
Bring back cigarettes.
Yeah, well, so this is the thing, Nicholas. I am of the opinion, however, that water vapour is better for you than nicotine, right? Surely. Well, not nicotine, but the stuff that... The delivery mechanism, the cigarettes themselves, that's carcinogenic in a way that the water vapour probably isn't,
Well,
right?
interestingly, yeah, the upside has, in a way, turned into a downside because the fact that it has been conceived as the lesser evil makes it all the more marketable.
Right.
Because of the colors, because of the taste, and because psychologically people think, oh, it's not as bad as a cigarette. So the number of people addicted, or young people using it, is on the rise.
Well, it's still addictive, of course. And all the people I know who went from cigarettes to vapes now smoke a lot more than they used
and
to.
also very emasculating, let's say that.
Yeah. And
Is it-
also,
it is.
if you can't get hold of a vape or vape fluid or whatever goes in them, then you're going to grab a packet of B&H.
I mean, a country where the king hasn't served in the armed forces and the youth are just very... It's just a recipe for Russia's...
Oh, Nicholas, you're worried about the
just gonna walk.
feminisation of our culture. That's what this is all about. OK, well, that's all we've got time for in part 2. But in part 3, we're going to be talking about a victory for the pronoun police, the real reasons why white people are evil, according to schools, and the BBC just can't seem to read the room when it comes to their disgraced stars. All this and more, we won't be a few minutes.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Unseasonably windy Saturday for many of us through today, all due to this low pressure system. We saw gusts close to 50 miles per hour, even in some inland areas of southern England, and those winds will be staying with us throughout this evening and overnight. We've also seen a good number of thunderstorms throughout the day as well. Those will continue to rumble on into the evening before eventually easing their way off a touch, but showery outbreaks of rain continuing across many locations overnight. The breeze that's in place will mean that our temperatures won't be dropping too far at all, most of us holding up around 12, 13 degrees Celsius. No, not a particularly chilly start to Sunday morning. The winds, though, will begin to ease their way down across southwestern areas of Wales into England, but it is still going to be quite breezy through Sunday for eastern coastal areas up into central Scotland. Some more persistent rain for western areas of Scotland, and again some thunderstorms possible in the east, north-east. In between some of the showers elsewhere across England and Wales, seeing highs around 20, 22 degrees Celsius. But still rather cool in that breeze that is around. The low pressure centre is going to push its way off towards Scandinavia as we move into the start of the new working week. So there will be still some outbursts of rain first thing on Monday for parts of Scotland, but they will gradually ease their way down, and most of us will then enter another day of sunshine and showers. The wind's noticeably lighter across southern areas of the UK, just the breeze still lingering on a touch more across the far north-east. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Sunday's newspapers. We're going to jump back straight in with the Mail on Sunday, and this one is about pronouns, our favourite subject.
Teachers will have to refer to trans pupils by their preferred name and pronouns if their parents say so, under new guidance which says children won't be able to use toilets of the opposite biological sex.
Right, so these are the new guidelines that the government has basically been sort of forced to put out because, you know, they were just leaving this, letting it go for so long.
Yeah.
Schools were really unclear. Like some schools were sort of allowing pupils to socially transition and use the name they preferred and the pronouns they preferred, and other schools were not. Some were telling the parents, some were not. Now, the problem with these guidelines, looking at it from what I've read in this article, the problem here is that if teachers are told they have to use the pronouns if the parents say yes, that's edging into compelled speech, isn't it, Leo?
Yeah, and also it's going to be very difficult to remember these, because it's not just like he and her, it's like there's all these like weird Z and Zer.
And there's they and them.
And they
which
and
they're
them.
using a singular, which makes no sense if you're an English teacher.
Yeah, and even the people who have the pronouns, I've seen Sam Smith trip up on his own pronouns. Right. You know, it's impossible. It's like you're trying to do this thing, it's like rubbing your belly and patting your head at the same time.
It becomes, Nicholas, it does become a free speech issue at this point, because most people use pronouns to denote the biological sex of the person they're talking about. And if a school, they're saying that the government isn't making it mandatory, but if a school says to the teachers, you have to misuse pronouns in this way against your conscience, there's definitely compelled speech at that point, isn't it?
Exactly. So as usual, the problem is that the majority of the society has to go along with something which can be described as a mental health issue or, you know, a legitimate question of idiosyncrasy or whatever you want
or
to
just
call.
Somebody wanting some attention, which teenagers and school kids often want. They're like, oh, I want to be special. Oh,
especially that.
I'm getting my nose pierced. Oh, I've got pronouns.
The good
all right,
thing is that
you're
parents... Sorry, I interrupted you. But the good thing is that parents have been given a bigger say this time round.
They have.
So only if the parents agree.
Only if the parents, but a lot of parents are ill-informed about this because there's so much misinformation out there about this particular subject. And as Maya Fossata has pointed out, this guidance is sending really mixed messages. It's saying schools should enforce sex-based rights, so boys aren't going to be able to identify their way into girls' sports. They're not going to be able to identify their way into girls' toilets. In other words, the teachers have to be aware of what the biological sex of the pupils are, but at the same time, they're supposed to play along with the idea that they don't know or they can't recognise the biological sex. What's going on?
But I mean, I think this is we've got to allow. You can't say to people, oh no, you're not allowed to identify as whatever. And you know, out of politeness, I think it's nice to go along with it. And to be honest, I'm in favour of just allowing if these liberal parents want their kids to get all confused and, you know, end up having all this surgery and stuff, fine, you can deal with it, but no refunds. No refunds. Listen, my taxes will pay for the first operation, on the NHS, but not the second one.
You're playing the long strategy here.
Yeah, there's no comebacks.
And the giveaway is, of course, the toilet thing, because you say you can socially transition, be dressed in the opposite.
No, but the government's saying they can't go into the toilets.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the giveaway, which means, you know, we totally don't fully believe.
No, exactly. Right, we're going to move on to the Express next, and Russia also addressing the trans issue in their delicate, soft way.
Russia is taking a slightly harder tack on the gender debate. So Russia is banning gender change, claiming it's a path to degeneration of the nation. I don't know if that rhymes in Russia, but this is basically Russian PR against the West. So Vyacheslav Volodin, who's the Speaker of the Duma, the Russian Parliament, he told the Parliament, "We are the only European country that opposes all that is happening in the United States, in Europe, and does everything to stop it." Russia isn't a European country, it's a Eurasian country. But, I mean, it's interesting how restrictive regimes deal with LGBTQ and trans, trans issues.
Too far.
So, Russia is sort of, you know, making a point of, you know, we're the opposite of the West, and the West is really, you know, playing into bigots in Russia's hands with this by pushing it too far. But in other regimes, such as Iran, they've gone the other way. Transitioning in Iran is basically mandatory if you're homosexual, because homosexuality is extremely strictly punished. So you can only get round it by transition.
It's such a mess, isn't it? But I think you're right. The way that we mess this up so much is a gift to these sort of authoritarian regimes. You've got, like in Hungary, banning sort of books if they've got a gay theme, even if they're not pornographic or anything, like really taking things to the extreme. And here in Russia, you know, surely, Nicholas, I know you're a conservative, but surely adults should be able to identify however they want and do whatever they want, so long as it doesn't impact on other people, so long as people aren't forced to use language they don't want to use, so long as sex-based rights are preserved. You know, that would be the sensible way to do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course. But again, it's playing into their hands, because just to look at what's happening in the West, especially in the month of June, you know, in our culture, safe spaces, cancel culture, and the irreversible harm that we've done to our kids just shows that they want to prevent this at any cost. And of course, when you want to combat some sort of extreme, you always risk the pitfall is falling down the other extreme.
The pendulum going the other way. OK, we're going to move on now to the Mail on Sunday. Good news for people who like their children indoctrinated, Nicholas.
I mean, this is fascinating. Revealed dossier of critical race theory being taught in British schools, including the so-called pyramid of white supremacy, and books that tell children as young as 4 that racism started because, quote, white people wanted more control over others.
Because there's no racism among other races at all. That's never happened.
They've never listened to what Iranians, Arabs, Chinese, Indians tell about each other.
What is the pyramid of white supremacy, and isn't that culturally appropriating Egypt?
Yeah, and who built it?
Yeah.
That is, because that could be an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory right there.
Absolutely.
But I think it's discussing the idea that racism, so the reader of one of these things is told that racism was started a long time ago when white people wanted to have more control over other people who are not white. And I'm sorry, but I don't think, I mean, that's a racist thing to say. It's separating people by skin colour. It's saying that only white people can be racist. White people invented racism. White people invented the concept of treating people differently according to certain attributes. And that's obvious nonsense.
Well, I remember there was a report in America, I think it was the New York Times, when they were talking about a racist attack from Asian individuals against black individuals, and they said that the perpetrators were enacting whiteness because they couldn't say they were racist because it's not possible for them to be racist. They were mimicking the way that white people behave. Now, this is important, this story, because it's talking about a report that was put together by a group called Don't Divide Us, and full disclosure, I was involved with the setting up of Don't Divide Us. But the point that what's so good about this movement and what the report has shown is that critical race theory is in British schools. It is happening even when schools aren't calling it critical race theory. And for a long time now, people have just denied it. They've just said, oh, they're not really teaching that stuff in schools. But the report proves that they are. That's significant, isn't it, Leo?
Oh, yes, it's hugely significant. And I mean, it looks like there's been a sort of slow march through our institutions, and education is one that is one of the most captured. You know, the gender ideology
theory as well.
Gender theory, which is related to this, you know, intersectionally, and the critical race theory is. I mean, people will look back and be horrified that this was taught to children.
They're basically laying all the blame for racism with the whites. They say whites invented this. Of all the things whites invented, and they invented most of the things. I went to school in a non-white country, and we learned about the periodical table of elements.
I wouldn't say the white people invented everything, Nicholas.
Scottish, you mean Scottish people?
Scottish people, I will take.
Penicillin. I'm alive because of, well, Fleming was Scottish, wasn't he?
Yeah, television, John Logie Baird, that we're on
we
right
learned
now.
that Isaac Newton could discover gravity while napping. That's how good these white people are.
All right, we're going to move on now to this story. Now, this one is in the Telegraph. This is about BBC comedy. Do we have this one, Nicholas?
Yes. Story 40. BBC puts, well, the timing of this couldn't have been more unfortunate. BBC puts comedy starring convicted child sex offender on iPlayer.
Now, this is... OK, so this is the thick of it. Now, certain episodes of the thick of it have been taken off iPlayer because Chris Langham is one of the main stars of that show, and he was convicted of an offence.
Yeah.
It's now back on iPlayer. Now, this raises questions, doesn't it, about separating the art and the artist and all that sort of thing. Leo, it's a really good series, and we should be able to watch it, shouldn't we?
I don't know. I mean, I just think, aren't there other opportunities to watch it? I can't watch it because I don't pay the licence fee. So I've got no idea.
I mean, just philosophically, theoretically, do you think, you know, there are all sorts of old films out there and programmes which have people in who are repugnant morally or people that we don't approve of in any way. Should you still be able to watch those things?
Well, yeah, you can still choose to watch them, but I mean, for the BBC to put it on iPlayer, especially when they're embroiled in the middle of another sex scandal involving, you know, an older presenter with young people, I think this is the thin end of the wedge of it.
Very fast. I love the BBC response. The BBC spokesman said, "We have a wide range of programmes available for viewers to watch on iPlayer."
Yeah, not all of them made by paedophiles.
I mean, it's a good show. Right? This is remember, the BBC have got that statue of Eric Gill's statue outside Broadcasting House. Now, he was a horrible man. He did some absolutely appalling things, but it is a great statue.
Some with a Labrador, I believe.
There was something with a dog.
Yeah. And it's funny, people try to take down his statue, but, you know, nothing. It seems the one thing that British people will get incensed about is somebody doing something with a Labrador.
OK, so look, that's all we've got time for in part 3, but coming up, we're going to be talking about nuclear fusion, the Minister for Men, and women making tea. See you after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it. it like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the final part of Headliners, your first look at Sunday's newspapers. Let's get to it. We're going to begin this section with the Telegraph. Leo, what's going on in the East Midlands?
So the UK is going to launch an Apollo mission for nuclear fusion in 2024, and it's they're saying it might not be ready until like 2040, or maybe not even ready by then. It's really difficult to do nuclear fusion. I mean, it's been done in the lab, but to make it actually produce more energy than is put in, because they've got to superheat plasma and hold it in magnets and
stuff. Is the point of this that there's no waste in the way that there is with typical nuclear?
There's no waste. Normally, nuclear power is generated through fission, so splitting an atom, and it creates radiation. It's done with uranium, plutonium, things like that. So it's bad. There's lots of
So if they can do this,
Fukushima. This is different. There's no radiation. It's done like the sun. It fuses atoms together.
So we're just copying the sun.
Yeah, we're copying the
and
sun.
it works. It's worked for
which
a long
lot
time.
of newspapers have done.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Nicholas, so this is surely good news, but it's very ambitious, isn't it? They're comparing it here to John F. Kennedy, talking about by the end of the decade we're going to be going on the moon, and they did. I know maybe you don't believe that, but they really did.
No, I do believe. It's not one of my favorite conspiracy theories. But what always concerns me with this whole green industry, green energy, and removing fossil fuel from our energy basket is that we'll be basically taking away from Arabs their only way of livelihood and subsistence.
They've still got falafel.
There's all sorts of ways. This is your Iranian part coming in now.
Yeah, I think, Iranians are not Arabs, by the way, because we don't want to go down that road. But, the sort of lifestyle they have grown to be accustomed to, it won't be sustained just on falafel.
But you must admit that this is a positive thing generally. And actually, eco-warriors historically have been very sort of sceptical about green energy, haven't they?
Yeah.
They haven't liked this kind of thing. Green economy and all that kind of thing.
But I'm not sure if this is going to be the slam dunk. I mean, if it's not arriving until 2040, because what we're seeing with solar panels is they're becoming so efficient, and so it's becoming so cheap every year. It's like the scale of computing power. Every year, the amount of power you get from solar panels compared to the cost gets better and better. So this might actually come into
between this and HS2. I'm curious to see which one takes off first.
Right, we're going to go with the Telegraph now. And Nicholas, are female police officers facing discrimination, or are they just milking it?
Well, this is a research by former officer Dr. Jackie Alexander for Portsmouth University. And she says basically they had to, the title is Women Police Still Make Tea for Male Colleagues to Fit In. This seems to be the cornerstone of the whole discrimination.
And they're suggesting that it's somehow immoral, it's somehow objectionable that you get women to make tea for you in the workplace. I mean, I don't think that's a problem, is it? It sounds like people want them to do that.
Women just feel the natural urge to make tea and make coffee, and we're seeing this in this article. So the women have naturally sort of volunteered themselves for the role of making
I think they've
tea
evolved that way. I think women evolve towards tea making.
And if it helps you secure that long-awaited promotion, what's wrong with that?
If officers are refreshed and they're caffeinated, so they do a better job.
But it's interesting. I mean, one of the officers is saying, I keep doing this, but she even says she goes out and does masculine stuff like drinking pints and stuff like that. But that's her decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And they also talk about a child tax. They say there's a tax on the women who have children are demoted or don't do as well.
As somebody who drinks Mediterranean style, I sympathise because I'm not a heavy drinker. But it's an undeniable fact that if you want to socialise with your colleagues, especially in this country, you have to go out, you have to drink heavily.
OK, we're going to move on now to this Telegraph story. Leo, you've got this one. This is about a minister for men.
So the government should appoint a minister for men to champion men's health and positive male role models, according to a former minister for women, Catherine Fletcher.
Now, this was actually a GB News interview, I should say.
Oh, it's coming. Yeah, it's coming up on Sunday. So tomorrow.
Glorious show.
Yeah, or today if you're watching the 5 a.m. show. But yeah, so we need a male, because there's been huge problems in recent years. Surging mental health issues with men, suicide. We don't have good male role models.
Yeah, and
we've,
yet
we've basically got Andrew Tate and that's it.
But then a lot of ministers have scoffed at the idea that men need support. Jess Phillips laughed openly about the idea that men... But you're right, men, there's higher suicide rates, there's more homelessness amongst men, there's more mental health issues and that. So maybe a minister... However, there is a Minister for Women and that is considered important. So, Nicholas, do you think it's a good thing to have a Minister for Men?
Potentially, ideally, we don't need to be divided, again, linking back to the previous stories. But yeah, especially when you see that men have been neglected, masculinity has been, looked down upon with terms such as, vaguely defined terms such as toxic masculinity. And one other issue I want to mention is family courts are heavily against and biased against men.
Okay.
And the question of custody of children is very pressing.
Well, we've got time for just one more story. If we're quick, this is the Mail on Sunday. Leo, you've got this one. This is about operations in Turkey.
Yeah, so in Turkey you can get operations done that are basically banned. Some of them are banned or discouraged in the UK. So liposuction, in Turkey they'll take out 15 litres of fat and they'll do liposuction. Even if you're obese, they'll only take out 3 litres in the UK.
And what's this about? They'll reconstruct your virginity?
And they'll do virginity repair. So I'm actually saving up for this. I don't know what it consists
I don't think you ever had a hymen, if I'm honest, Leo.
Really?
Well, that was I didn't pass GCSE biology.
What was the bleeding?
Well, but let's not go into the gory details about that. But Nicholas, any very quick thoughts on this one?
Well, despite all woke commercials that we watch, it looks like that people still don't believe that hashtag everybody is beautiful. So much so that they go to Turkey to sort it out. But it's obviously dangerous.
It's dangerous and it shouldn't be encouraged, absolutely. The problem is it's not illegal over there, but it is illegal over here.
Yeah.
It's illegal here for a reason.
But I got my hair done in Turkey and they did a much better job for much cheaper than my mate Rory, who spent 15 grand on it.
I think a hair transplant is less serious than what they're describing here with liposuction and that kind of thing. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. So before we end, let's have another quick look at Sunday's front pages. So the Mail on Sunday leading with George can skip stint in forces. That's Prince George, of course. The Sunday Telegraph has new homes must have green road schemes. The Sunday Express is leading with a £12 trillion Brexit trade boost. The Sunday Mirror has Call the Midwife Love Split. The Daily Star has James Bond to hunt down psycho scumbag robots. Those were your front pages. That's all we've got time for. Thank you so much to my guests, Leo Kearse and Nicholas De Santos. We're back tomorrow at 11 o'clock, of course, and also Free Speech Nation will be on tomorrow at 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock. That's my show. And by the way, if you're sticking around and you're watching the breakfast show at the moment at 5 a.m, then do stick around because breakfast is on just after the break. Thanks so much for watching Headliners. Join us again tomorrow, 11 o'clock, where we give you all the rundown on the next day's papers. See you then.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Unseasonably windy Saturday for many of us through today, all due to this low pressure system. We saw gusts close to 50 miles per hour, even in some inland areas of southern England, and those winds will be staying with us throughout this evening and overnight. We've also seen a good number of thunderstorms throughout the day as well. Those will continue to rumble on into the evening before eventually easing their way off a touch, but showery outbreaks of rain continuing across many locations overnight. The breeze that's in place will mean that our temperatures won't be dropping too far at all, most of us holding up around 12, 13 degrees Celsius. No, not a particularly chilly start to Sunday morning. The winds, though, will begin to ease their way down across southwestern areas of Wales into England, but it is still going to be quite breezy through Sunday for eastern coastal areas up into central Scotland. Some more persistent rain for western areas of Scotland, and again some thunderstorms possible in the east-northeast. In between some of the showers elsewhere across England and Wales, seeing highs around 20, 22 degrees Celsius, but still rather cool in that breeze that is around. The low pressure centre is going to push its way off towards Scandinavia as we move into the start of the new working week. So there will be still some outbursts of rain first thing on Monday for parts of Scotland, but they will gradually ease their way down, and most of us will then enter another day of sunshine and showers. The wind's noticeably lighter across southern areas of the UK, just the breeze still lingering on a touch more across the far northeast. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to GB News Breakfast, voted by you as the nation's best multi-channel news programme at the prestigious Trick Awards.
Good evening, fellow travellers. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Neil Oliver Live. Coming up tonight on the show, we'll be joined by philosopher Dr. Piers Ben to consider whether, in the wake of the Hugh Edwards revelations, it's too easy for prominent people to abuse their positions. We'll also be talking to a former member of the Hungarian Parliament about the importance of free speech on social media and to contemplate the dangers of censorship in countries with autocratic leaders. And finally, in a real change of direction, brown bread ice cream is making a comeback. From Dover Castle to Stonehenge, 13 English heritage sites will be serving the 18th century treat this summer. All of that, plus plenty of chat with my eloquent panellist, Ingrid Tarrant. But first, an update on the latest news from Ray Addison.
Thanks, Neil. Our top story tonight. Councils in England and Wales have joined doctors in calling for a ban on disposable vapes. The local government association wants a UK-wide ban to be imposed next year over damage caused to the environment and the danger to young people. It says the 1.3 million vapes discarded every week are a litter blight and a fire hazard. Earlier this month, the British Medical Association voted to review the potential dangers of vaping, describing it as a growing epidemic. Well, junior doctors have been striking for a third day in England. The BMA has warned the government that their members will not back down over demands for a 35% pay rise. That's despite the Prime Minister adopting the recommendations of independent pay review bodies and making a final pay offer of 6%. The 5-day strike, the longest in NHS history, runs until Tuesday morning. The government is considering scrapping inheritance tax in a bid to win the next general election. The Times is reporting that the move could be a manifesto attempt to secure votes in so-called blue wall seats. It would come at a cost of £7 billion. Most couples can pass on up to £1 million to their children without paying any inheritance tax currently. Parts of the UK have been experiencing strong winds and thunderstorms, with yellow Met Office warnings in place across the south of England and Wales and Scotland. The Goodwood Festival of Speed had to cancel today's events for the first time in its 30-year history, and London's Kaleidoscope Festival at Alexandra Palace had to be called off as well. Weather journalist Nathan Rao told GB News high winds can be more dangerous at this time of year.
Across the south of England, that's London, the south east, the east of England, Leicester, Leicestershire, Essex, all that sort of area. That's for gusts of up to 55 miles per hour, which doesn't seem that high, but remember that the trees are in full leaf at the moment, so strong gusts can cause more damage than they would do, say, for example, in November when all the leaves are down.
Well, it comes as the Cerberus heatwave continues to sweep across Europe. A forest fire has broken out on the Spanish island of La Palma in the Canaries. Authorities have had to evacuate more than 500 people, with an area of around 200 hectares destroyed by the blaze. One of the last two ships exporting grain from Ukraine under an agreement with Russia has now arrived in Istanbul. The Black Sea grain deal, which expires on Monday, has enabled Ukraine to export grain and food safely over the past year, despite the war. Ukraine is a major supplier of key crops like sunflower oil and barley. Moscow is threatening to pull out of the deal and is calling for Western sanctions to ease. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been admitted to hospital due to dehydration, according to his office. It comes after local media reported that the 73-year-old had experienced chest pain. His doctors say nothing is out of order, but recommended he keeps undergoing routine checks. Protesters have assembled outside the hospital and continue to demonstrate against the Prime Minister's judicial overhaul. Marketa Vondrousova has made Wimbledon history by becoming the first unseeded woman to win the title in the Open era. She beat Tunisia's Ons Jabeur in straight sets, 6-4, 6-4. The Princess of Wales presented the Venus Rosewater dish to the Czech player, who is on the road to recovery after injury stalled her early career. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Time now to go back to Neil.
We're a long way through the looking glass now, well inside the alternative reality where up is down and wrong is right, where anything goes for a self-selecting in-crowd, and if you're not in that in-crowd, then your sense of right and wrong makes you a reactionary, fascist, conspiracy theorist fit only for ridicule and cancellation. I know I'm saying some of the same things over and over, but it's only because those things are true and worth remembering and keeping, and I won't stop repeating them, because if we stop telling the truth, then the game's over. In the end, the truth is all we have, but also all we need. It's important to know we're being actively and blatantly lied to by the authorities. If you don't know as much already, know now that the authorities lie about anything and everything and always have, because it's in the nature of the personalities involved. Good liars are hard to spot, but by now we're being lied to by bad liars, which at least makes it easier to see them coming. Just as a for instance, Rishi Sunak is utterly, utterly unconvincing about everything, even when it comes to playing the part of a regular human being. If he was telling the truth, which he isn't, he still couldn't sell a life raft to a drowning man. Spotting the lies now is, as the cliché has it, like shooting fish in a barrel. Fundamentally, we're now being lied to about the right way to think, the right way to see the world, the right value judgments to make. We're being lied to about what basic morality looks like. I say we've been walked through the looking glass towards the point where we're to believe all the values we held before were wrong. I say don't believe a word of it. The metal fittings that hold the oars in place on a rowing boat are called rowlocks. What we're being told now sounds a lot like rowlocks, but it's a word I can't say at 6 p.m. We were invited to see BBC newsreader Hugh Edwards as a conventional figure. In recent days, it's been apparent that in many ways he's unconventional. But the response from the in-crowd in the aftermath of that unexpected revelation, the reply from the self-proclaimed great and good, from those that think they know best and that certainly like to tell the rest of us what to think, has been, what word to use, revealing. Frankly, it's none of your chattering class, white van driving, state-educated business, they've said in not so many words. That, in short, has been the message from above. The Sun newspaper broke the story. People all over the place paid attention, reacting out of surprise, and many started to make noises that they were unimpressed, to say the least. And then the Alistair Campbells, John Simpsons and the rest weighed in to inform us that the activities of one of their own, one of the in-crowd, were none of our concern. What's worth noticing more than anything else is how quickly and overwhelmingly we've been encouraged to disregard as utterly irrelevant the revelations themselves and to condemn instead those who've asked questions about what exactly was going on when it came to someone who nightly trots out the state of the nation as the establishment wants us to see it. One authority figure after another has come forward in recent days with words to the effect that if there's a problem, then it rests not with them in the in-crowd, but with us out here in the general population. It comes from the same in-crowd that says, when we do it, whatever we do, it's because we're superior and sophisticated in ways you regular tax-paying, law-abiding types cannot begin to appreciate. The overweening condescension of the self-appointed in-crowd has always been there. The difference now is that they're rubbing our noses in it as part of the effort to bully us into thinking everything we think is just plain wrong. Over and over again during the years just past, those regarding themselves as our betters in every way blatantly disregarded the rules and regulations they had imposed upon the rest of us. The message was that in COVID, as in the rest of life, it was one set of rules for us and none at all for them, and you better not question it, or else. When we do it, it's because we're intellectuals who went to the right schools and universities. When we fly in private jets and take multi-car cavalcades to the climate conference, it's because nothing's going to change for us, while everything changes for you. When you heat your home with a gas boiler and drive a diesel van for your work, it's because you're downright stupid and reckless. We'll heat our homes how we like and drive what we want, while you walk to work and live colder, hungrier lives. I read politics, philosophy and economics at Oxford, they say. So when I didn't wear a mask and partied with my chums, it was altogether different than when you proles felt the need to gather at your dying dad's bedside or hold hands at his funeral. Always the message is along the lines of, pay your TV licence and get along with you if you know what's good for you. Or raise a question or two about any of the in-crowd and feel the wrath. What I'm asking is, where are we now when it comes to what most people would consider ordinary values, family values? Where are we when it comes to knowing the ways of life to stand by and to defend? Do we any longer have agreed standards of acceptable behaviour? Setting aside the drama of the past week, it's hard not to notice a bigger, more sinister trend. The all-encompassing notion we're being invited to accept is that nothing about traditional values and morals matters now. It's especially the case that nothing, that is nothing to do with the human, nothing to do with the family, nothing to do with the child, is sacrosanct anymore. That echoing message of you'll own nothing and you'll be happy turns out to mean that among everything else we're supposed to hand over is any certainty about right and wrong. Apparently we're to be happy with the idea that right is whatever the powerful say it is, as well as being happy without our freedoms, our cash, our right to home ownership, to drive our cars. We're to be happy without our opinions, far less the right to express them. We're to be happy with whatever we're given, including what to think. Having opinions about what our children are told at school is apparently the mark of a disruptive, intolerant, dissenting radical. Questioning the notion of men in drag reading fairy tales to toddlers makes us right next door to criminal. Knowing that as parents we should have the final say in what our children are taught about sex and relationships, and by whom, is apparently a mindset that comes from consuming all that misinformation on the internet. All the time the message from on high seems to be, why are you bothering about the education, the conditioning of your child, and outmoded ideas about protecting the innocence of childhood. More and more, I worry about the well-being of children, about what they're being told is right, about what they're being encouraged to accept as normal everyday life. And out there in the darkened background of what we're being invited to see is the knowledge, the absolute fact indeed, that unknown and uncounted numbers of babies and children are being trafficked around the world. You might say children have always been bought and sold, and you'd be right. But now, when there's more information than ever before about the scale of the horror, anyone demanding the raising of the alarm is treated with suspicion, if not outright contempt. The team behind a movie on general release in the United States called The Sound of Freedom, about the efforts of one man to disrupt child trafficking and to rescue as many children as possible, is under attack by the in-crowd. Rather than concentrate their fire on the monstrous trade in children, bigger than the arms trade, soon to be bigger than the drugs trade, mainstream critics and pundits are more inclined to ridicule the people attending the movie as white-haired QAnon crazies. Instead of dealing head-on with the nightmare described by the movie, the preferred response has been to suggest that anyone taking the allegations seriously is no more than a crank. The Sound of Freedom has taken more than $40 million at the box office already this month. But in Rolling Stone magazine, the piece by the author seemed less interested in the content of the film and more inclined to ridicule audience members calling out "Amen" in response to uplifting moments. Are we supposed to take from that the idea that practicing Christians are more appropriate targets for attack than people buying and selling babies? In the strange new world where apparently to disregard the well-being of the child is all just more of the ethos of owning nothing and being happy, which is to say that in the threatened future, parents will have no say over their children either. In the imagined, idealised world of the future, children and therefore the adults they might become will be the concern not of the parents and the family, but of the state. The pervasive message that anything goes as long as it's not illegal is as corrosive as cancer. As government grows more powerful, more distant from the people, so that government feels more entitled to write yet more legislation to the detriment of those people. What might they legalise next, or at least invite us to regard as perfectly acceptable? Why, for example, is there always a push to further lower the age of consent? I say now that the scent in the wind, discernible to anyone paying attention, is the next nudge. The nudge right now is towards accepting paedophilia. Paedophilia is going mainstream. Paedophilia by any other name. Those that were once called paedophiles are now described as minor attracted persons. Always the tactic is the same. It's about a foot in the door, then a leg, then the whole body. Have you noticed the steady procession of so-called authority figures people were supposed to trust and to believe, refusing to condemn behaviour that 5 years ago would have been regarded as beyond the pale, while simultaneously refusing to say what a woman is? Here's the thing. Despite what you may have felt yourself being led to believe, right is still right, wrong is still wrong. The well-being of children, all children, must always be central to our civilization. And don't for 1 second take your eyes off anyone trying to distract you from the truth. Joining me tonight for the whole of the show is broadcaster Ingrid Tarrant. Ingrid, what do you think about where we're being led? Yeah.
Have to. You are amazing.
Oh, Ingrid, please.
Honestly, that monologue, it's so powerful. It really is. That might have been the wrong thing to do, but you are right about right and wrong. There is no distinction anymore, and it starts in the classroom. Teachers, you'll own nothing and be happy. That's what they want. They don't want people to think for themselves, no critical thinking, no understanding. I mean, the fact that paedophiles are now given the kind of quite nice name, MAP, or minor attracted people. Why are they doing that? Not to shame them, so they don't feel quite so bad about what they really are?
Why is it wrong, all of a sudden, to hold the values that most people in this part of the world have held and navigated by for generation after generation? What has made the decision that those values are no longer worth retaining?
Do you know, you'll probably think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I think that over time, it is all kind of like the big plan, the Great Reset, you know, and things like that. Because over time, and I've seen it, if you look back before and to now, we've been desensitised first of all. The other thing, we've been so overly protected and mollycoddled. You can't fall over, you can't graze yourself. Nobody understands hurt, pain, challenge. So we've become, or not we, but the next generation will emerge as just nothings. They won't really think for themselves. They won't take risks because they've been so protected. They're not allowed to. Health and safety was a great driver of that, wasn't it? You won't get the wonderful explorers of like going out there on a limb and risking life and limb because they don't. So to me, this is all part of that you won't think, you won't have to worry about anything, you won't have to face challenges. It's taken care of, it's removed. You're removed from all responsibility. And that is the blameless society that has emerged in the last 20 years as well. Everybody's blameless.
What I notice more and more, though, is where there's an allegation made or demonstrable fact, where people say, can we talk about this? Can we debate this?
Well, sometimes they just deny it full stop.
But the question, the spotlight of ridicule and cancelling goes on the people who want to have the debate. The issue at hand is set aside. Never mind that. Never mind what it is you want to talk about. Who are you and why do you want to talk about that?
Because it's the uncomfortable truth. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want you are cancelled. It's gaslighting in a way. You know that you're right, and thank goodness, actually, for a lot of the aspects of social media, that you realise you're not alone in your thinking. But generally, the powers that be, the authorities, they're gaslighting, cancelling us.
And there's, for me, as I said, there's something very corrosive indeed about the notion that as long as it's legal, it's fine. Because any government can legislate anything it wants in this day and age. And we have to remember that there's a profound difference between legal and lawful and between what's legal and what's right.
And also, the other thing is, Neil, there's no criminalising of a lot of these things. So it may not be kind of legal, but you realise that it's wrong, but they don't criminalise it. So, therefore, it becomes acceptable.
So where do you think we are now as a society? Are we fully adrift, or is there still a way back to the shore?
No, I think we are. I think we're hanging on by a thread. I think
Even though everyone still knows what's right and what's wrong. We all know.
Well, do we all know? I think that a lot of these children growing up now actually don't. We do because we're of that generation. That's how we were brought up. But I think we're financially bankrupt for sure, and we're morally bankrupt as well. I do.
I think when it comes to the fundamentals of right and wrong, I think people know it without being told. I think everyone, babies cry when they're mistreated, and babies smile when they're given love.
Yes, that's
and the right
automatic.
Kind of attention.
Yeah,
we know.
Neil, I think on the whole that's true. But supposing you're brought up in a family where all you've seen is cruelty, maybe that your father, stepfather, whatever, beating up your mother to a pulp and so on, they wouldn't know that it would frighten them. But they might think that that's quite normal, that happens in normal society. So, again, being desensitised.
Got to get into a break. Hold that thought, Ingrid. Coming up next, though, we'll be joined by the academic and philosopher Dr. Piers Benn to discuss whether, in the light of all of this, it's too easy for people in positions of power to abuse their positions. You're watching Neil Oliver Live on GB News, the People's Channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. A few years ago, the world of the West was, it seems to me, a very different place than today. So much has changed in every part of life. I have all sorts of questions, but my quandary boils down to where are we now as a society and where are we going? Joining us to help us find some answers is philosopher and ethicist Dr. Piers Ben. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening. Hello.
This is a topic that fascinates me because, you know, during the pandemic we were nudged. We know that it was admitted that we were being nudged by behavioural scientists to behave a certain way. Are we being nudged to have a different view of right and wrong, or am I just being paranoid?
What do you mean during the COVID pandemic, or just
where our behaviour was being intentionally nudged by the adverts we were seeing and the propaganda we were hearing, and I wonder if we're being nudged to accept a different morality.
Well, I suppose the question there is what is nudging and what's actually wrong with it. I mean, morality at its best is a rational process. It's not something you take on authority, although, well, not ultimately something you take on authority, though there may be authority you should follow. If you're being nudged in the right direction, you could say, well, you know, that's what the law does, that's what public opinion does, that's what your neighbours do. Your neighbours nudge you in all sorts of directions that may be for good or ill, in ways that lead you to behave in certain ways without necessarily thinking them through. So if by nudge you mean influence, are we being influenced to form certain moral views? That's not necessarily a problem. I mean, maybe we need to be influencers. I mean, a moment ago you were talking about how, you know, morality is broken down and maybe schools should be stricter or whatever it is. That's a kind of nudging. In fact, it's more severe than that. It's threats of punishment. I mean, the question is, is our rationality, is our ability to think about moral questions being undermined by... And that's a really interesting question you're onto.
What would you say is the answer to that question?
Well, it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on what we're talking about. I think when it comes to, say, public health, and you mentioned COVID, I think we were... I mean, it's a very complicated issue, what we should have done, and nobody really knew because, you know, so much was unknown in the early stages. But we might have been nudged to be rather unreflective about how to balance the various goods at stake, so public health versus individual freedom. And maybe we were being nudged or sort of bullied, if you like, into a public health direction without sufficient thought. But I don't think the problem is exactly nudging or what I might prefer to call influence. The problem might be in the direction you're being nudged in and whether you're being allowed the capacity to answer back and to reflect.
But aren't you in part there presupposing a benevolence or a benign authority that's doing the nudging. You know, if you're, it's all very well if you're being nudged by a benevolent entity, but what if you're being nudged by an authoritarian, totalitarian entity that's working in favour of vested interests, not yours?
That's the problem you find in all sorts of societies. You're bound to find it. You find it in, there are good schools and bad schools. There are schools that nudge you in bad directions. There are states and societies that nudge you in bad directions. I mean, the most extreme example would be, you know, the Soviet Union and the other countries where people were nudged to think in a certain way and weren't given the means to think in other ways. I mean, the real question about things like, I mean, let's call it indoctrination, if you like. It's in the same area. I mean, indoctrination operates by depriving people of information and by bombarding them with the preferred information, while undermining people's ability to think these through things autonomously. For some.
To bring it back then to the specific of what's been happening this week with the BBC and the emerging simmering scandal there.
Yes.
And the notion that nothing illegal took place. You know, isn't it important to pay attention to the difference between legal and right?
It depends what question you're asking. If the question is, you know, should Hugh Edwards, as it turned out to be punished for what he did? Should he be shunned? Should he lose his job? I think it is relevant to ask whether he did was illegal. And just because you say that he didn't do anything illegal, it doesn't mean he did nothing immoral. And of course, there's a distinction between law and morality. And in liberal democracies, such as we're supposed to have, maybe some of you do have, in liberal democracies, that distinction is enshrined and should be.
Ingrid, do you feel that in that context we were being influenced to disregard any notion of morality and just to contemplate legal and illegal?
I think it's so complex. First and foremost, I think the BBC were just protecting their product, so that anything that went with it came under that. They were the legality, the morality, and all that sort of thing almost came secondary to them. That's my sort of belief in it. But the thing is, you say that, you know, this goes on, and we're talking about Hugh in this particular case. It's an interesting thing because obviously he's bisexual, but being, you know, LBGDQ, XYZ, whatever it is, honestly, I've lost track of all the letters, is accepted in society. And so, again, it's a very difficult position that one's put in, where you're accepting that on the one hand, but you can't accept that on another hand. And therefore, does it all boil down to the fact that he's a household name, a national figure, and therefore it makes it more wrong? I don't know. What's the answer?
Well, I mean, I think whatever you think about homosexuality, bisexuality and so on, there is a distinction between moral questions and the question of what the law should be. And I think quite rightly in the 1960s, the law was changed. It was thought, you know, the Wolfenden Report and the subsequent change in legislation decided that there were areas of private morality, that's the wrong phrase, but areas of private that should not be the law's business. And that's surely right. I mean, adultery, for example, you might think is immoral, but it's not a matter for the police. It should not be.
What about the nudge that's going on around paedophilia, I would say? You know, this notion of a minor attracted person. You know, why would authority be in the business of renaming you know, a group as though to distance it and make a dichotomy between how they were regarded in the past and how they are supposed to be regarded?
Well, who is doing this? So, I mean...
Well, I don't know who came up with the acronym. I don't know who came up with minor attracted persons, but
the
nonetheless...
press are playing along with it, though. That's the thing. So now it's become the new speak.
I mean, the odd thing is that paedophilia, if by that you mean actual sexual activities with minors, is and should be against the law. Public opinion is strongly against it, and there have actually been panics about it. I mean, in 2000, when this happened, in the wake of various horrific murders. I mean, clearly that's a case where consent can't be given, and it's quite right to make it illegal.
As someone who watches and pays attention to notions like ethics and morality, do you think there is a shift going on in our society? I mean, that's what you could say, there's always a shift amidst like the weather. But is there a drift towards something more louche and towards something less defined?
It really depends where you're looking. There's a great danger of anecdotal reasoning with all these questions, looking at what you want to look at and not looking at the rest. I mean, I think earlier on you were discussing about morality in schools. Actually, I find the young people today, the ones I teach, more moralistic, if you like, in certain areas than they were When I was young, I mean, people are much more conscious of racism, for example, much more conscious of this sort of thing. These are moral questions. You know, whatever you think about what racism actually is and so on, and we can have lots of debates about that. Those are moral questions. And I think when it comes to sexual morality, I mean, I think, you know, it's perfectly true that over the last 50 years there's been a shift in public attitudes towards, say, things like sex with people you're not married to. I mean, nobody was batting-handed at that. And homosexuality. And I think on the whole that shift has been good. But there isn't a shift towards infidelity. People do actually balk when they think that people are being betrayed, or when when minors are being exploited, for example, or people with less power are being exploited. There's actually a much greater moral awareness of those things. And you know, to that extent, it's a good thing. It can go into overdrive, obviously. It often does.
Do you share that interpretation? You know, that what Dr. Ben is saying about our youngsters being more moralistic in certain ways.
Yes, do you know, funny enough, I do. And I see the younger generation being very much more monogamous, and they've really got wonderful relationships. They've got real friendships in that relationship. No, it's true.
I mean, they can't afford their own homes either. That's
no, they can't either. But no, I think they're kinder. But in a funny way, I find that came with the loss of or the rise of feminism in that sort of thing, where it was all equal, which I kind of like. I felt a little bit sad. I love it. Neil Suchton, when he opens doors, and I kind of like rue the loss of that. But at the same time, it has brought about something very, very good, because they see themselves and they treat themselves as equal. So there isn't that difference in status. You know, sort of the male is superior to the female, and so on. So that is a good thing. But do you think religion or the loss of religious studies in school has made a difference? Because I do. I think there's a whole whitewash now, because we have to be multicultural and all-inclusive.
What do you say, Doctor?
Well, I think we should be multicultural to the extent that we do live in a multi-faith society, although actually a society predominantly secular. And schools should teach what people actually believe. People should understand other people's beliefs. That is not relativism. That is not teaching that there's no right or wrong, or that every religion is equally true. I mean, that's clearly nonsense. And no liberal like me wants to defend that. But it's right that people should be taught tolerance, which means putting up with what you don't agree with, towards other cultures, other ways of life. On the general question of religion and morality, I mean, if the question is, do people behave better if they believe in religion, that's empirical. I don't think there's any evidence, actually, they do. In fact, some of the less religious countries, like Japan, Scandinavia, Czech Republic, these are very non-religious. There's no evidence of any increased crime. In fact, there's less.
Going to have to jump in there for a break, but thank you very much for a very even-handed,
thank you.
very open and even-handed debate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Dr. Piers Ben.
Thank you.
Into that break now. Coming up after, we'll be joined by former Hungarian MP Zoltán Kes to talk about the importance of free speech on social media and to consider the dangers of censorship. You're watching Neil Oliver live on GB News. We are the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Unseasonably windy Saturday for many of us through today, all due to this low pressure system. We saw gusts close to 50 miles per hour, even in some inland areas of southern England, and those winds will be staying with us throughout this evening and overnight. We've also seen a good number of thunderstorms throughout the day as well. Those will continue to rumble on into the evening before eventually easing their way off a touch, but showery outbreaks of rain continuing across many locations overnight. The breeze that's in place will mean that our temperatures won't be dropping too far at all. Most of us holding up around 12, 13 degrees Celsius. No, not a particularly chilly start to Sunday morning. The winds, though, will begin to ease their way down across southwestern areas of Wales into England, but it is still going to be quite breezy through Sunday for eastern coastal areas up into central Scotland. Some more persistent rain for western areas of Scotland, and again some thunderstorms possible in the east, north-east. In between some of the showers elsewhere across England and Wales, seeing highs around 20, 22 degrees Celsius. But still rather cool in that breeze that is around. The low pressure centre is going to push its way off towards Scandinavia as we move into the start of the new working week. So there will be still some outbursts of rain first thing on Monday for parts of Scotland, but they will gradually ease their way down, and most of us will then enter another day of sunshine and showers. The wind's noticeably lighter across southern areas of the UK, just the breeze still lingering on a touch more across the far north-east. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with Neil Oliver Live. I'm joined now by former Hungarian MP Zoltan Kesh to talk about the importance of free speech on social media and about the dangers of censorship in countries with autocratic and totalitarian leaders. Good evening, Zoltan. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening. Hi.
Zoltan, first of all, what online censorship are you aware of in your homeland? You know, to give us a sense of what, if anything, is different.
Well, basically, it's not necessarily censorship that we have. It's a whole different media landscape that we're talking about regarding Hungary, especially when you look at who owns the media. For example, I come from a small town, and in this town, there is no chance to watch or enjoy anything that's not owned by the government or the government oligarchs. So that's a kind of censorship in a way. Also, we see self-censorship of journalists who work for papers owned by the government because obviously they don't want to lose their jobs. As far as social media censorship, I haven't seen any example, luckily. I don't want to see any example of social media censorship.
Whatever grounds for a government seeking to take and apply control over what people are seeing and saying.
I couldn't get all the question, but basically, yes, the government is controlling what people are saying.